All right, hello, and welcome back for episode 36 of the Path Podcast. I am Jason.
Hey there, I'm Derrick.
And we are so glad that you decided to join us on the Path. Today we're going to discuss the second half of Galatians chapter 4, kind of look at a handle to hold on to, and it's a big one. It's an important one today for us to remember. But then afterwards, we have an interview with one of our church members that we want to share with you that I think would just be really cool to get some different perspectives other than just us two all the time. But stay tuned for that. It's going to be really good. I think you'll like it. But Derrick, walk us through, try to help us understand what is a handle to hold on to from Galatians chapter 4 this week.
Sure. So the handle to hold on to from the last episode was you can't do anything, right? Mm-hmm. Basically, and so today there's similarity there.
Yeah.
And I think that's important for us to understand kind of how we come to this thing, right? Our Christian life, we kind of talked about the last episode, hey, what do I do? And it's like, you can't do anything, like,
yeah.
And it's like, it's kind of hard to understand. And kind
of there has to be an action step.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to give you that exact handle, but that is kind of the handle. Is like, depend on God, depend on Him. It's what Paul's reiterating again and again to these to the Galatians.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I see kind of underlying, we talked about in the message, the imagery of family, belonging. I think that's something at the core of every person. They have that need of feeling there.
Yeah, we all want to be a part of something.
Right.
Yeah. But
underneath that, there's other imagery. It's like Paul's trying to reiterate again and again what we bring to the table, which is nothing, right? Mm-hmm. So he says in verse 8, but in the past, since you didn't know God, you were enslaved to things that by nature are not God. So it's like he's saying, hey, listen, before you came to know God, or before He knew you, because that's what he says in the next couple of verses, you were enslaved. And it's not like, somebody is enslaved, but once the evidence comes out, they're acquitted, right? Yeah. Because they had good behavior.
Right.
No, it's like they're there because they were worshiping other gods. They were there because they were rightfully enslaved. Mm-hmm. And we have to remember that about ourselves, is that we were rightfully enslaved to the world.
Yeah.
But God brought us to the table, right?
Yeah.
So He freed us from that. And I think that's more freeing than the idea that I'd somehow earned my freedom or played a part in my freedom. No, I was fully enslaved, and I needed to be, and God freed me. So
and you had no way to free yourself.
No, I couldn't free myself.
There's no way to free yourself.
Exactly. To fully reiterate that idea is that I was rotting in a prison.
Yeah.
And that's what he's saying. And I deserve to be there, just like what he's saying to the Galatians. And God, in His kindness, said, I want to free you.
Yeah.
And it had nothing to do.
Yeah. And it's not like you wrote a letter and said, hey, listen, this is who I am. And God went, oh, yeah. Well, He deserves to be free.
Yeah. So you see that. You see Paul speak about the slave woman and the child of the slave woman that's the child of the free woman.
Yeah.
And so it's like God is saying, you're a 90-year-old woman, Sarah, and a 100-year-old man that have never been able to have children and certainly can't now.
Right.
But God gave them fertility in their old age. You see what I'm saying? Like, that's something they couldn't do. They tried.
Yeah.
For 100 years. Couldn't do it.
Yeah. And
God said, now you're fertile. So it's that same imagery of we could do nothing. God did it.
Yeah.
We talked about yesterday the imagery of adoption, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not like, it's not even like some kid was on a website and you're like, hey, I'd like to adopt him. It's like they're stuck, in poverty, in squalor and difficulty, no parentage, no hope, an orphan, a true orphan.
Yeah.
And God brought them into the family. And then, so all that's the imagery. You could do nothing, God did. Yeah. But then, you were unworthy, you were enslaved, you were a 90-year-old woman, 100-year-old man, you were infertile. And then God breathed freedom into you, breathed life into you, brought you to the table, and gave you a seat of honor. Because he says, you are co-heirs, because you're children of promise, you are co-heirs with Christ.
Yeah.
And even as I was just preaching, studying too, but just preaching, it just hit me like, I have no right to be on an equal playing field with Christ.
Yeah.
But God has placed me there. It's not like I'm just like, the servant boy at the end of the table and says, please, sir, may I have some scraps, right. or whatever.
Yeah.
I am in a chair of honor. I wear the robe of Christ. I am, Christ has made me worthy to sit there. God has made me free, fully free, and fully, and that should. So what do we do with that, right? What's the handle? What do we do with that? I don't know about anything else, but just to be grateful, and to not forget it, right?
Yeah. And I think maybe that's Paul's point here.
Yeah.
Because I can understand how somebody would hear what we're coming back to every week and going, this seems kind of redundant. But we need that redundancy. We are not so advanced that we have not moved past what the Galatians were dealing with. No. We deal with the same thing day in and day out, that as followers of Christ, we have been brought to the table that we have no place being at. And God sits us in this seat of honor. And yet we go, I think I want to go sit back in the squalor. And we do that. And we, you hear that and it sounds silly, but we do that over and over again, just by the way that we live, by our actions, by our thoughts. And I think that's maybe Paul's point, and it's the point for us that don't, like you just said, don't forget who you are. It's not just that, like we were talking before we started recording, that it's not just that this is who God says we are. It's not just that he's like, okay, I placed this title on you. I mean, you're still scruffy old whatever, but I'm placing this title on you. No. This is who we are now. This is our identity. It's not a matter of, this is what God says we are, but we're still that. No, we are this now. We are co-heirs with Christ. We are sons and daughters of the King. And we now, because of Christ, not because of us, but because of Christ, we do deserve to sit at that table because of what Jesus did. And I think that is something that we can never, ever overstate. No. It can't be overstated. That we have been completely and radically changed in our very identity because of what Jesus did.
Yeah, and then that should floor us every day.
Absolutely.
We should wake up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And breathe the freedom in, not arrogantly, but just to say, God, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Lord. Thank you. Oh, you are so good, God.
And then, and maybe it's not even right away, but eventually, we have to breathe it in so much that we just can't get over it. And so that we can't get over it to the extent that we're like, hey, listen, let me tell you my story.
Yeah.
To whoever we come in contact with, I was enslaved to sin. I had no way to break the chains, but Christ broke them for me. In fact, he took them on himself so that he could inherit my sins and I could inherit his blessings.
Yeah.
Don't you want that too?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And man, that's how the church grew in the early, that's how the Galatians had even come to that.
Right.
Because the gospel, like a giant wave, just went across the entire world, and Paul was at the heart of it all.
Yeah.
And Paul's reminding them, look, you were Gentiles, you were far from God, and He brought you close.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, what you just said remind me of there's a Matt Redman song where he says, "We're breathing in your grace and we're breathing out your praise," and that should characterize who we are. That we breathe in God's grace, the grace that He brought us to the table, and we breathe out His praise that He is so good and mighty.
Yeah.
So, man, great handle to hold on to this week. Thank you for that. All right, so we have a really cool opportunity to share with you an interview that we did with a member of our church. We're going to share with you an interview with Anita Gilreath, and I'm really looking forward to sharing with you what she had to say about a couple of questions that we asked her, so stay tuned for that.
Hi, Anita. Can you tell us what brought you here to our church? When did you come and how did you come?
Okay, yes, my name is Anita Gilreath, and let me begin by saying that I was raised in a Christian family. I grew up in church at a local church in our community, and it was always played an important role in my life. And I was saved at 8 years old and was baptized there. And after Neil and I got married, we got married there. And after we married, he moved his membership there. And so we were very active in that church for many years, just with the exception of the time that he was in the part of the time that he was in the military. Our children were dedicated in that church. And as the years went on, we were searching for something different, something more in our spiritual life, and we especially wanted that for our children. So we felt like that we wanted to go to a larger church that had a larger children and youth department. So when our children were in the third and third and fourth grades, we decided it was time to begin our search. And we visited another local church a couple of times, and then I was working at the Bank of Lafayette, and Bob Gilbert, who is the father of Dave and Wade and Ellen, asked me to come into his office one day. And so he said, "I understand that you and your family are searching for a church home, and it is not my policy to recruit members from other churches, but if you're interested, we would love for you to come visit at First Baptist Lafayette." So that's what we did. We came, we investigated, we liked what we found here. And so after much prayer and discussing it with our family, we joined this church, and we've been here almost 40 years. It was a good move for our children. They were involved in Sunday school and RAs and act teens and GAs and choirs and all the activities for our children and youth. And it was also an especially good move for Neil and myself. I got involved with teaching. I taught on a team in 5-year-olds for many years. I also served as a leader in GAs and ACT teens, and did various other things over the years. Neil was very busy at that particular time getting his college degrees, and so he wasn't all that active, but he later, as he had more time, he became more active in the church and has served as a deacon in various committees, and can be seen around working on the campus, volunteering, especially outside, which is one of his loves. And so I would say that the decision to move to Lafayette First has been a life-enhancing experience for us, and the one that we have fully embraced.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. Tell us, like, one of your favorite memories. What, over those many years, what's something that you just look back and think, man, this was an awesome time at our church, or whatever you'd like to share?
Well, that's really hard, so I've chosen two.
Okay.
One occurred in the late 1990s and into the 2000s, when we were beginning our first major remodeling project, and the church selected a committee to serve on this for this project. So I was one of the ones that was selected. I felt very inadequate serving on such a committee because I had no building experience except for when we built our home. I had no experience with commercial building, and I kept wondering, why am I on this committee? But I soon found out that when the Lord selects a committee, He knows what He's doing. And He puts members on that committee who are willing to serve. And so, fortunately, I was surrounded with people who had a lot of experience in building and in remodeling, and I found my niche. They needed someone to keep records, to write checks, and that was just what I love to do. So I found my place on that committee, and it was a very interesting time. You find out a lot about people. You find out, I learned a lot about maintaining a physical building, keeping it in service for your members, your current members, and also thinking about the future, what the future holds for our church. And so that was a very important time in the life of our church. And that committee, it turned into about 3 phases, and it's still really ongoing. But I stayed on that committee for, I think, through about 3 phases, and finally decided that it was time for me to move on. But it was a really good experience for me, and many of those faithful servants are still on this committee. But I've moved on to other responsibilities. Another one of my favorite memories is of the many musical programs that our church provided for, not only for our church family, but for our community. And the 2 that really stand out in my mind are the 4th of July. We had so many patriotic musicals. They even moved them to the parking lot, and I just love our country and the patriotic music. And while I don't have a musical bone in my body, I love listening to the talents of our church family. And the Christmas presentations were so meaningful and so worshipful and hold a special place in my heart. And it was just not Christmas without that program. But I remember in 2015, I'd had rotator cuff surgery in Columbus, and I was recovering at my daughter's house in Macon. And so it was not long after my surgery that it was time for the Christmas presentation. And I just could not imagine missing that presentation. So I convinced Neil to drive me home, to drive us home for that weekend. And although it was a very painful trip and took a little while to recover from that, that was one of my outstanding memories because it just really made Christmas for me. Mm-hmm. And so it was, I just remember those beautiful presentations by our choir.
That's great. I pray that with COVID diminishing, we'll be able to do that program, Christmas program again. I'd love for you to share with us just your dream for the future of our church. What's the dream that you have?
Well, yes, I do have a dream. My dream is that it will be even better than it was as the pandemic hit our country. It seems that as a church we were really getting into our stride with a new staff and lots of ideas for growth. But when the pandemic hit, things came to a grinding halt. But as always, God knows our needs in advance, and He provided us with a staff who accepted and met daily challenges that we never dreamed would be facing us. I remember being in Florida with my cousin when the country was closed down. Neil had come back home to take care of some home repairs, and I had stayed down there with her as she recovered from an illness. And so the country closed down, and we were separated for 2 months. And during that time, our staff kept our church family together and through worshiping by the means of live streaming. And so we were able to continue to worship together, and we really look forward to those times because it felt like that we were together as a church family. And so with the phone and the internet, our family kept in close contact, and we even discovered Zoom, and sometimes we could all be together that way. And just in the past couple of weeks, Neil and I have been able to return to church to worship in person again. And so when I think about my dream, I dream of a time when we can discard the mask, we can sit close together, we can hug each other, and we can fill the sanctuary, listen to our wonderful choir, and just worship our faithful Father. In this dream, I hope that we will all come together for the common purpose of worship and realize that while we may differ in the ways that we worship, or the type of music that we enjoy, or the type of decor in which we worship, we come together each week with deep respect for those differences. Our church family has a wide range in age, and we come from different backgrounds and different needs and different desires. My prayer is that we will all find something that meets our deepest need at some point of worship, and that our community will feel welcome by the love of this church family.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That was great. I appreciate you sharing with us all those things.
All right, well, great thoughts that we get to experience and think about this week. I hope that you enjoyed that. We're going to be doing more of that in the days ahead. But we would love to hear from you. Are there any dreams that you have for our church? Is there some great memories that you have here? We'd love to hear about it. We'd love to know and celebrate how God worked in the past and how we hope and pray He works in the future here at Lafayette First. You can contact us at thepath@lafayettefirst.life. We would encourage you to do that, or you can comment on this YouTube video or on this podcast. But until next time, I am Jason.
I'm Derrick.
And we will see you next time as we continue down the path.